I read 18 books this month. Definitely had some real winners, which I think you should read. And then I had some that I wouldn't recommend to anyone, not even my worst enemy. So, which ones were the winners and which ones were the losers? A small disclaimer before we start. As always, this is just my opinion and only my opinion. You may disagree with me, and if you do, I'd love to hear from it. I'd love to hear from it if you agree with me too. So put your comments below, and I hope you subscribe and like this video, and we can continue to do this together. Starting off strong with Behind Closed Doors by Shain Rose. This book was awesome. I loved this book. So it's still a dark romance. Most of my books I'll be reviewing today are dark romances. However, I would call this dark romance dark romance light. If you're looking to see what the whole dark romance world is about and you want to kind of tiptoe your way into it, this is a great book to start with. It is a part of a series. This is the first book in the series. And it is, I call it mafia romance adjacent. So there's a crime syndicate, and you have Jameson, the MMC. He's the head of that crime syndicate. And you have Mia Darling, who is the teacher of his young daughter, because he is a single father. He is definitely just got all the vibes when it comes to that. The tailored suit, the single father, like, this was done well. Anyway, so one thing I really liked about this book, so you have the inciting event, and the first 2 chapters, it hooks you right away. There's a lot of action that happens, and you are just like, oh, wow. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this book. It's got everything from action to humor to attraction, all in the first 2 chapters. This is well done. Just like anything else, you want to hook people in right away. What is this story about? Why do I care about this story? You get that right away. It's no slow lead in. Now, it is a bit of a slow burn between the characters as far as their romance goes. And as you proceed in this book, not only do you get that escalation of attraction, but you also get that escalation of feeling. So that yearning between the 2 characters. That is really well done. And you have a lot of the common tropes, everything from the jealousy angle to the, I'm the bad guy. I'm too bad for you. You're too good. One thing I really appreciated is that all of these characters had conflict. They had genuine conflict. It was not just straight up miscommunication. There was genuine conflict in their lives, both externally and internally. And the external being an obvious one because, there's the whole action kind of part of it. But the internal conflicts were really, really well done. Now, I did call this, in my previous review, a bit of a Jane Eyre retelling. You'd have to read the book to find out why. One of the things I really appreciate about this book is the pacing, and it's that kind of romance book where you're reading it and you're like, oh, that type of thing. I love that. That's why you're reading it, right? You want the feels. You want to feel excited about seeing these 2 characters come together. But they are complex characters. There is character development. The plot moves along at a brisk pace. There's no point where you're like, oh, okay, let me just slog through this part. No, you definitely have that movement with the plot. So you have those multiple storylines too of the various characters. You do love the side characters, I would say, were written really well. So much so that I really want to read their stories. Miss Rose, please give me Archer's story. I want Archer's story. I love that character in there. But I would say that by the end of the book, this is 100% a complete book, a beginning, middle, and end. Even though it's part of a series, it is a complete book. It would be, I'd say, even a standalone by itself if you don't want to read the whole series. So every thread is closed. There are no open threads by the end, which I genuinely appreciate. I have read so many books recently where they decide, I guess the authors don't understand that even if it is part of a series, even if it's part of a duet, even if you want a cliffhanger ending, you still have to complete the story. You have to close the threads of that particular story, not necessarily of the whole arc. For this book, every thread was closed and it is a complete story. I highly recommend it. It was well written. Bravo, Miss Rose. Great book. Pick this one up, you guys. You will not regret it. Trust me. Now, moving on to the next book, did not have quite the same feelings. I labeled this the worst book of 2026. This is Blood and Roses, Volume 1, Callie, Hart. All right, so here's the thing. TikTok loves the book Quicksilver and the whole series, Quicksilver and Brimstone by Callie Hart. Loves it. I've heard nothing but praise about it. So instead of reading those books, because, you know, they've been reviewed about 1 million times over, I was like, well, this is her latest release. Let me give this a look because I want to see what this author is about. This is a new to me author. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to read the latest release, Blood and Roses. I mean, it's a pretty book. It looks cool. It's got the sprayed edges. Awesome. I'll caveat this. I have since found out the stories were it's really in an omnibus. So these stories were actually previously published 10 years ago. So 2015. And they're now repackaged and put together in 2025. So perhaps the author has just exceedingly gotten better at writing. And there are characters and everything else. But everything I said about the last book, this book did not have. One, you have the main male character and a female main character. So the fundamental plot is that you've got the FNC who has a kidnapped sister, and she's trying to find her and find out what happened to her. The MMC is a mafia enforcer that could potentially help her figure out what happened to her sister, and they come together. Now, this story, everything about it, I couldn't stand, because I couldn't stand everything from the dialogue to the characters to the plot or lack thereof. It was plenty spicy, but here's the thing. I'm going to make this argument. So many people act like spicy is enough. That's not a plot. Spicy is not a plot. You should still have a plot. Your book should still have stakes. It should still have development. It should still have a plot. It should still have flow. It doesn't matter how spicy that book is. You need this book to still have basic literary elements in order for that book to be enjoyable. So I have an MMC who is so one-noted. He has zero development, zero, less than zero, in the negative range. He is, I am bad guy, and I will say every stereotypical bad guy thing. Oh, and let me do some really unhinged, spicy stuff. People who read it will be like, oh my God, spicy. Give me a break. I've read plenty of unhinged, spicy stuff. But you know what I still want? A story I care about. Now, I understand suspension of belief when it comes to literature and fiction. I get that. But sometimes you still have to follow the rules in which you set the story. So if you're going to have a trauma surgeon at the age of 26, you are breaking the rules, because she's got to be a flippin' prodigy, and there's no evidence to that, in order to be a trauma surgeon at that age. And there are characters introduced that have no ending. Like, they're just introduced and then you never kind of hear from them again. Like, why are they there? Perhaps it's in volume 2. But you know what I don't care about? Volume 2, because I could not care less about these characters. Because not only are there no stakes that I care about, there are stakes introduced, but they simply fall flat. I think it's ultimately the lack of character development and the cliched dialogue that killed this book. And when I say cliched, I mean cliched in the most cliche fashion humanly possible. It just felt so bad. Like, everything about this. I wanted to see at least some development between these characters. I think though what really killed it for me was just it was just the cliches. It was the dialogue. It was the main male character. I could care less about him. If he got run over by a bus, I might have cheered. I would have DNF'd this, but I knew I would be reviewing it, so I decided to power on through. Oh, did that cost me? It took me forever to read it too, because it was just so bad. I do not understand, because I've seen plenty of people out there on BookTok and stuff talking about this and saying this is an awesome book and it's a must read, 5 stars and all this. Why? Please explain why. So if you read this book and you thought it was an excellent book, by all means, defend it. Tell me in the comments below, what am I getting wrong? Because I could not stand it. Not even a little bit. Okay, so rant over. Now we're moving on to, this is where most of my reading went this month. So I actually read the whole series. So this is the Royals of Forsyth University series. There are, just to set this up a little bit, so you have this Forsyth University, and they have various fraternities. These fraternities really kind of double as like organized crime. But they base them off royalty. So you have the lords, the dukes, the princes, the barons, and the counts. Now, the first 3 books in this whole universe are the Lords series. So that's books 1 through 3. Books 4 through 6 are the Dukes. Yes, you can see this is a Duke book. Books 4 through 6 are the Dukes stories. Books 7 through 9 are the Princess stories, and 10 on go from there. 10 starts the Barons. So the basic premise is this. It is a why choose reverse harem book. And you have these fraternities, and they have these 3 lords or dukes, these 3 royals. And these fraternities get one woman that they share amongst them that live in their house with them. And the idea is that they own her. And if it's dark romance, set in a college setting. So if you're not a dark romance person, that sounds very alarming to you. If you are a dark romance person, that sounds pretty standard stuff. Everything that was not done in a dark romance with a lot of spicy in this book, these books have a lot of spicy and they're very dark. It did well. I have stakes, I have plot development, I have character development, I have an emotional connection with these characters, even though I have a very spicy and very dark. I want emotional attachment to these characters. I want to know, why do I care about these characters? And these books do a pretty good job of that. They each have their own story, their own reason why they got to where they got. And I'll tell you what, they do a good job, because at times there were characters in this book that I thought were completely not redeemable, even a little bit. Like, I wanted to throw the book across the room. I get so mad. And I would talk about, like, this guy, I know the author is going to try to redeem him later. I don't think they can do it. Impossible. And of course they did. So that was really, really well done. But there are some caveats to this series. The Lords series, loved it. 10 out of 10. Great series. Really just got into it. And it was really what catapulted me forward in this series instead of moving on to other books. Why I spent 10 of my reads on these books this month. So the Lord series, excellent. The Dukes, a very different flavor, much darker, but still an excellent read. At first, I didn't like it because I was like, this one guy is a real dumpster fire. Like, I don't think so. But as I read it, it was so good. I definitely recommend continuing at least the Lords and the Dukes. So then I got to the Princess series. And there was a lot of good there, but then there was things I didn't really enjoy. I would say about the last book in that series, it seemed to wander a lot and it seemed kind of all over the place. But the books 7 and 8 were good. But if you're going to start the Prince series, you want to finish the Prince series. So I would say as a maybe on the Princes, but definitely the Lords and the Dukes. And then I read book 10. So book 10 is the Barons series to start off. I DNF'd that book, you guys. And it takes a lot for me to DNF a book, but I just didn't enjoy it at all. It lacked grit. It lacked the emotional stakes. I could not care less about these characters. And I just did not like it. The FMC was definitely in this state of vulnerability and somewhat a victim type thing in the early years, and Lords and the Dukes and the Princes. And you felt bad for her because like all these terrible things happen. But at the same time, she had a backbone. Like she had fortitude. Like she definitely had a spirit to her that you're like, yes, I like her. She's got something. I did not see that in 10. And I felt like there was a lot of things they had done in previous books that was tried to replicate that in 10 and did so poorly. Now, let me caveat this. So this book was a duo that wrote it, Angel Lawson and Samantha Rue. And apparently by book 10, this duo has split up and only Angel Lawson continued the books from 10 on. And I think there was something with that dynamic with the two of them writing it that gave that depth and that flavor to these books that made them compelling and made me want to continue reading them. That was missing in book 10. So it's not that it's necessarily a horribly written book. It just wasn't a compelling book. I just didn't want to read it. I didn't want to finish it. And so as a result, I DNF'd it. I mean, I'd already read 9 other books in this universe at this point. I knew what I was getting into, and it just wasn't for me. So I would say if you're going to read this, definitely read books one, the Lords and the Dukes series, maybe the Princes. You may or may not like them, and then stop there. Consider it a complete series. And it's really too bad because I would have loved to seen how they continued on with the Barons and the Counts, but such is life. This series, rather, if you're looking for a why choose, again, start with those other two. It's a good choice. Just make sure you're stopping at the right time. Now, this is new for me because this is Lights Out by Navessa Allen. I'm sure you've heard about it. Everybody's been talking about it. But the reason why it's new for me is I don't do audiobooks. Audiobooks and I have this complex relationship. I can't stand them because every time I try to read listen an audiobook that's a romance book, it seriously sounds like some creepy guy it has called me up, is in my ear being like, hey baby, what you wearing? You know, the calls are coming from inside the house. It feels like a 1970s, bad trope movie. I can't stand it. It feels so cringy listening to it. But here's the thing. Audiobooks have a lot of, they're great because you can do chores, you can go exercise, you can be driving, and you can basically still be reading a book. I love the idea of audiobooks. What I've disliked was the execution. So I'd heard nothing but great things about the audiobook in particular of Lights Out by Navessa Allen. And I decided to give it a go. You guys, I am officially a convert, at least for this book. This audiobook was so good. So good. Everything I dislike about previous audiobooks, this book absolutely solved. I would say this. I listened to it on 1.2 speed because of the nature of the character Josh, MMC. He definitely, you want to hear his voice faster. Like he's one of those people, like kind of a frenetic energy. And it comes across funnier when it's a little bit faster. So if you are going to listen, at least listen to it on 1.2 speed. But it's a rom-com dark romance, which it sounds weird, but it's a thing right now. There's others that are out there, and it was really, really well done. Would I have felt the same way if I just read it versus the audiobook? Because the audiobook brought so much gravitas to this. I don't know. But I do know I love the flipping audiobook. Now, it is part of a series. It's the first book in the series, the Into Darkness series. The second book is Caught On, and then Game On is the third book in the series. I will continue the series because I genuinely enjoyed this book. And I'm interested to see how this series continued. The whole series seems to be very, very popular. And this is one of those books. Does it hold up to the hype? Yes. Yes, it does. But the audiobook, you guys, if you do not like audiobooks like I do, trust me, this is the one. This is the one that will convert you because it was just so well done. I'm very interested. I'll probably continue with the audiobooks for the second and third book just to see, because the first one was so well done, to see if I had the same reaction to those. But I would recommend this every day of the week. You guys read or listen to this book. 10 out of 10. Do recommend. A Secret in the Garden by Jeneane O'Riley was such a good book. Also pretty, sprayed edges, yada yada. This was a modern day Gothic. You have everything you would expect in a Gothic. You have the atmosphere, the house is kind of a character. You've got the broody MMC. You've got a mystery. You've got a ghost. So all of those things that you're supposed to have in a Gothic. And this is modern day. But what really impressed me about this book was just the excellent writing. I would read like a descriptive paragraph about the setting and the house and things like that. And I would sit back for a minute and be like, wow, I really feel that writing. I really feel that and feel that I'm there. So it's just so well done. And that meant the writing about the MMC and the FMC and the yearning between them was just amazing. Like, there was the mystery, the pervasive mystery that goes through the thread of the spine of the book, which is, did he or did he not kill his parents? Is part of the whole setup and mystery. I did do a long form review of this book. But it was the way that the yearning was back and forth. And I want that. I want the yearning. And it felt like that type of Gothic style yearning. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was definitely a slow burn, but it was that Gothic style darkness, but, you can see them together. Like, they can't stay away from each other. Yes, all of the yeses. If nothing else, for just the superior writing. Everything about this, and I did really, really appreciate. So one of the things with Gothic, you're going to have a lot of conflict, a lot of internal conflict, because that is the whole broody nature of Gothic literature. And one thing I loved about this book was how well she tied up every single thread in the book. So everything in there. Now, I did talk about the plot twist being just okay, but everything else was so flipping good on this book that I was willing to overlook that, which is a pretty big thing, because a plot twist, is a big part of the book. So that the writing and the romance was so well written in this book that I could overlook an okay plot twist. That's pretty damn good, you guys. You know what? There's nothing that says there's a lot of criticism out there on romance books on them not being written well. Proof that you can still have a really well written book, really good writing, and still be a romance. So I say, y'all don't know what you're talking about. There's really good writing out there in romance books. This is The Last Second Chance by Lucy Score, and it is book number 3 of the Blue Moon series. It's a small town romance series. It's an earlier series for Lucy Score, who I generally do enjoy as an author. I really enjoy her books. I like rom-coms. They're like little refresher palettes every once in a while. And I do like some small town romance every once in a while. It's not the genre I want to read every day of the week, but I do enjoy a brief sojourn into that world. Now, a caveat on this book was this was a book I had previously DNF'd. And I went back to look at it and said, okay, did I DNF this book because it was a mood? I just didn't feel like I was in the mood for it. Or was the book generally not good? And I don't recall it being a bad book. I just didn't ever complete it. It was one of those, I started reading it and it just kind of sat there and sat there and sat there until finally I got tired of seeing it on my TBR. So I just said, DNF, moving on. Well, I decided to go back and try it again. And you guys, I did it again. It was another DNF for me. And I figured out, I just found it a little boring. So I had read the books number 1 and 2, and it's basically, this family, these brothers. And this is a second chance story, which probably should have been a red flag for me because I don't like second chance romance. I've tried a million of them. I just don't like them. And anyway, these two, you have the FMC and the MMC, and they have grown up together. They've been childhood friends that became, lovers, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Anyway, I don't know all the details because I just didn't read for long enough, you guys. But there is an accident that happens when they're in that teenage years, some bad accident, and she gets injured. And the idea is that, like, I guess it freaked him out or something, and he took off to California. Well, now he's back, and he's determined to win her over. They're adults, they're in their 30s. And he's determined to do right and win her over. And I kind of just didn't care, you guys. Like, the writing wasn't bad. The plot was okay, I guess you could say. But I just kind of didn't care. I was over it. Like, it just didn't hold my interest. So I guess the stakes weren't high enough or the plot didn't move fast enough. So it's one of those two things. If you're going to DNF a book, there's some reason for it. For this book, Lucy Score knows how to write. She's a good writer. She does good character development. So I would say the likelihood of it being either the stakes weren't better defined or high enough, or the plot drug. So in other words, it just didn't have a snappy plot that gets you from one moment to the other. Maybe it was the conflict, but the conflict was already there, or the internal conflict or lack thereof. But either way, I can't tell you too much about the book because I DNF'd it. It wasn't for me. I tried a second time. At this point, not going back. We are DNF for permanent. Now, I did do some vintage romance books this month. I like to pull out a vintage every once in a while because I can remember back in my youth, when I say youth, like we're talking like 12, 13 years old. We all had this experience of reading romance books that we should not have read at that age. So I wanted to pull out some of these old style vintage romances, the 80s, the 70s, the 90s even, like the early 90s. I read a couple of those this month. So this is Prince Kidnaps a Bride by Christina Dodd. Now, this is actually part of a series, the Lost Princess series. And the idea is, this goes across the series, that you have these three princesses, this princess of this kingdom, this made-up kingdom near Italy, Southern Europe, that underwent rebellion. And the grandmother, who is the queen, sends these princesses off to points unknown in order to protect them from being, killed or whatever, so she can protect the royal line. Now, I guess there was this servant that was supposed to be loyal to the queen, was the only person that knew where these princesses were, but he turned out not to be loyal. She never found out where the princesses ended up, and they are lost to time, lost to wherever. And then you have the MMC in this is a prince. And he is a prince of a neighboring country who also underwent a rebellion. However, he did lose his country. He was also friends with or around the FMC his entire childhood, and they were betrothed because she is the crown princess and he is the crown prince of his country. And the idea is that he goes to the queen and says, look, I lost my country. You kept yours through the rebellion. Can you help me take my country and my throne back? And she says, yes, I will, under one caveat. You need to go find my princesses. You find my princesses, you get to pick whichever one you want. I know you've been betrothed to the crown princess, but I don't care. You can have any one you want, but bring them back to me. Well, he does. This is the third book in the Lost Princess series, so the other two have already got their HEAs with someone else, so he finds them and finds that out. And now he's on the hunt for the crown princess, his original betrothed, and to find her so he can marry her and then get the armies he needs to take back his crown and his country. Well, yeah, here's the thing. It's not a bad book. It has some, moments. Like, some of them I'm like, come on now. I mean, his big disguise was wearing a scarf over his face. Because the idea, of course, she's known him her whole life. She's going to know who he is. But he's wearing a scarf over one side of his face. So, therefore, expert in disguise. It's so stupid. But here's the thing. I would call this like in a maybe category is what I would put it. It's not a bad book. It's really not. It's fairly well written. The plot is kind of like, it's silly at times, but you expect that out of a vintage romance book. So go in with the understanding and the expectations of what a vintage romance book brings you. I don't think it'll be bad. This is not bad, but I'm kind of the, I could take it or leave it. Like, the stakes are there. The plot moves along sometimes kind of ridiculously. There are some elements that are introduced and you're like, what happened to them? It is a complete story, a beginning, middle, and end. And of course, because it is also the end of the series, it kind of ties into the previous 2 books as well. So you get the end of the whole series as well with this book. I'm of a take it or leave it thing. It was an easy read. I think we used to call these like beach reads back in the day. It was entertaining, but it didn't really leave a lasting impression. This is the kind of book that I read it, and then about a month from now, I'm going to forget every single thing I read about this book. I would say maybe if you're in the mood for a vintage romance, it's not got some of the most Unhinged in it. It's fine series. And then if you're talking about Unhinged vintage romance, let's talk about Catherine Coulter on Devil's Embrace. You guys, this, I believe, was her first historical romance book. So this one got some age on it. And it was apparently a duology with the idea of that you have her and then their children or daughter in the second book, which is apparently worse than this one. All right. So the premise is this. You have the FMC. She is engaged to be married to kind of her childhood sweetheart. This guy that they both loved each other through childhood and now into adulthood. And she's so excited to marry him because, he's back from the army or whatever. And on the eve of her wedding, she is kidnapped. She is kidnapped by a neighbor who has apparently been keeping his eye on her because... And this is where it gets really, he was in love with her mother, but her mother, who died giving birth to the main character in this, died and married her, the FMC's father, and then died. And he saw that the daughter looked a lot like the mother, so he just shifted his attraction from the mother to her, which felt so gross to me. So he's much older, so there's an age gap. There's an abduction, of course, because we are in vintage romance. So there's a lot of non-con in this, you guys, like a lot. But here's the thing. A lot of it is used as a plot device because or tried to use as this foil to show like this non-con is okay and that non-con is not. No. And it's a forced proximity romance in where he takes her on the eve of her wedding and he decides that if he just forces her to be with him and to be near him, she will eventually fall in love with him. Because, that's how it works with women, right? This also, they're all over the map. They're all over the map in terms of plot, in terms of geography. This freaking book is so convoluted. And I think this is I felt like I was fighting for my life reading this book. I think back in the day when I was young, if I'd read something like this, I would have been scandalized and just reading it like, eating it up. But now as an adult reading this, I'm like, this is like, it's so paper thin on the development of these characters. And it's made up by, let's put really unhinged plot points in here instead. Just like there's the evil step brother or half brother rather. There's the evil half brother, the evil former paramour. And that plot line fundamentally just kind of stays hanging out there. And that's how you know it was a plot device, some of the actions in this, because they weren't fundamental to the story if you took them out, and they made no difference to the story. And only in the epilogue, by the way, is how that thread is closed. So it's not a component to the story that was necessary. And this is, I think, it's not a symptom of vintage romance. I think it's a symptom of this being her first book. But it apparently did well because Miss Coulter, of course, went on to write many, many books and had a long and storied career. So it's not a reflection on her writing in particular as much as it was a debut book in a time where Unhinged was celebrated. And not a lot of people ask questions like, does this plot make sense? So you have these paper thin character development and emotional arcs. You have this crazy plot that's all over the map. For all of these reasons and more, I would not recommend this book. So if you're looking to read a good vintage romance, this is not the one I would pick up. You might want to pick it up just to be like, I need to see what all the fuss is about. And I know some of y'all out there, because I know you are like me, a lot of y'all out there read this book when you were younger, and you're wondering, did it hold up? I'd say no, because now I expect more out of my romance books. I do. And so should you. We should expect more out of our books. We should expect that really good plot. We should expect that really good emotional arc and that character development. I should care about the stakes in these books. So a lot of these books from the vintage era just ended up having, I would say, some weaker characterizations. Now, I will say this, and this is just an, oh, by the way, if you're looking for really good vintage romance writing and you're looking for someone who really knows how to do great characterization and great plot, pick up any Julie Garwood vintage historical romance. Those books, I think I own every single book that woman has written. And very good. Again, that's just a, oh, by the way, recommendation. I will definitely go back and revisit some of those books in future months because I like having this nice blend of old and new as I read through all of these books. But yeah, that sums up my entire month of April and all the books I read. Let me know what you guys think. I'm always anxious to hear your opinion, to say like, what the hell are you thinking, Renee? Or if you agree with me, or even if you have any recommendations, by all means, I love recommendations. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.